Time now for the Sunday Talk, where we tap into the debate of the week. This week, not Trump, not Islamophobia. Instead, we visit that old chestnut. Are millennials spoiled babies? The accusation this time came in a video that has gone viral. It's a battle between generations, and we're going to have it here tonight.
Entitled and narcissistic, and self-interested, unfocused, lazy.
As the stereotype goes, if you were born in the 80s or 90s, you may not be prepared for the real world.
Perhaps because they got so much praise growing up and they got a trophy just for showing up.
Millennials, accused of being addicted to social media.
If you're sitting at dinner with your friends and you're texting somebody who's not there, that's a problem.
Demanding an unrealistic work-life balance.
If I'm able to do my salsa dancing in the evening time, that's a way to recharge myself. So in the morning, afternoon time, I'm able to sit on the computer and work.
They're called snowflakes, unable to hear opposing views. These Berkeley students rioted when a speaker with far-right views stepped foot on campus. But others argue that sensitivity is really passion. Millennials drove many of the protests against Donald Trump.
Don't take this as a defeat, just take this as motivation to work harder.
They're said to be less materialistic.
They want to spend more on experiences than they do on physical goods.
They're battling a tough job market.
I was literally doing 2 free internships, one from 9 to 5, then going from 5 to 9.
And social media? Well, one new study shows that if you're between 34 and 49, you spend a bit more time on social media than millennials. I'm joined by our panelists tonight, one millennial, one on the cusp, and one definitely not. Hadia Rodrigue is an employment lawyer and journalist. Adrian Batra is editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun. And Elamine Abdelmahmoud is social media editor at BuzzFeed Canada. So as our honorary millennial, Elamine, we'll let you in just a second. But I'm going to start with...
the one who's not on the cusp.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what you are. You're Gen Xer, maybe.
I guess so. Born in 73, so where does that put me?
Probably Gen X.
Gen X.
Yeah, well, that's the me generation,
there
right?
you go.
So let's make it all about them. What do you think of millennials? Coddled, entitled?
Yes, I think so.
Really?
I do. That is my experience with many of them. I mean, perhaps a present company excluded from that. But I think that there is. You know, we love to hate on them, and it's become a pastime. You know, there's dinner time conversations about how much we despise millennials. There's lengthy articles written about this now. It's almost like they're the kid that we want to pick on the schoolyard for a whole host of reasons. But I will give them this. I don't think it's all their fault. I think that there are a number of reasons why they got to the point in which they did. But I would only say to many of them, get over it and move on and toughen up and don't run to your safe space every time someone says something you disagree with.
So you're coddled, Elamine.
Apparently so. Listen, there was an Abacus poll, I think it was a few months ago, that came out that said half of the baby boomers think that millennials have it tougher than any other young generation. Even the boomers agree that we have it tough. And we do because we graduated during a time just post-recession. Our real wages have never been lower. Our wages are going down. People are doing 2 internships. We're existing in a world that is just not helping us out at all.
I'll let you back in a sec, but where do you stand on this, Hadia?
Well, I have trouble painting an entire generation with the same swath and the same brush. I can tell you, for example, both of my sisters are millennials, my boyfriend is a millennial, and they're quite different. And most of the millennials I know are hustling because precarious work is on the rise, they have to work multiple jobs, they barely sleep, they're using social media less. They see the bleak economic future, and it's hard not to ask for things like vacation time and work-life balance when you're not getting the other things that you've been promised by working hard and trying.
Here's where I would say, picking up on what Elamine is saying with respect to the job market and you know, seeing a potentially challenging economic future. I do hold former generations responsible for that. There's an extraordinary inequity when it comes to the debt burden we've put on them and the amount of taxes they're going to have to pay and the market that has been created.
So then what's your problem?
But with all of that said, every other generation has faced many problems, many other challenges, some in case war in some cases. And so if you are put in this position, then work your way out of it. Don't blame everybody else, and don't want to have everything thrown at you, and you need these so-called work-life balance. Like, I'm sorry, yeah, working 2 jobs, that's a reality. That happens. You have to pay for these sorts of things. You pay your dues.
Really rich,
That's the reality.
We've heard this before, but listen, baby boomers didn't have it difficult. They came out, they found jobs in factories with high school education. They stuck to them for 30 years, and then after that, they got to retire. That's really nice for them, but we don't have that experience. We don't have.
You don't think that there was economic struggle? They don't think that that was a generation that actually had to do
never generalize and say
things
that.
and
but we don't have access to the job market in ways that no generations before us have ever had.
I think millennials have huge problems. There's issues with depression. There's all sorts of. The social media isn't helping. There's no question about that. But I think that it's just, they need to stop complaining.
They keep moving the goalpost on us, and then we keep saying we're tired of running, and they're like, "Oh, get over it and keep running." And I don't think it's unfair.
You teach millennials, Adia. What is your sense? Is life harder for them than the generation before?
What it is, they're graduating with huge debt, and there are no jobs for them to pay off that debt. So when I went to law school 12 years ago, law school tuition was $16,000. The generation before me paid 2 or 3. And so now they pay 32. Wow. And they're not getting a different education than I did 12 years ago than the generation did before, and there are fewer jobs. Like, for example, on Bay Street, in my year, we hired 19 people at my firm, and then when the market crashed, they hired 10. The law schools are still letting in the same number of people, in fact, sometimes more. And so where are they supposed to go?
But what about this idea of, like, the idea of a helicopter parent? Is not a new idea. That instead of having, there's a lot of only child families, and so there's more attention for the kids. Has there been what some are calling a failed parenting strategy in terms of too much encouragement? You're very special, and here's your medal for coming in last.
I've been a millennial all my life, and I never got
a medal.
Never got a single participation medal the whole time because I don't think those existed. What about you? Have you got a participation medal for anything?
I think this might be something that's class-based and race-based. I hear this a lot about white middle-class families, but I can tell you, as someone who grew up as a working-class Black immigrant parents, I was told I had to work twice as hard to get what everyone else got, and I was not coddled in any way. I wanted to take creative writing in high school. My dad made me take night school so that I could take that.
Wow.
I had to get there myself.
You've got kids in school. There are. I mean, it is different.
It is.
When I was a girl.
Well, of course. We have that sort of notion of how our parents, raised us, and you'd show up at 6 o'clock for dinner, and no one was helicoptering anybody at that point. I think there's a big part of that. I think the so-called you get a participatory medal just for showing up. You don't get A's and D's anymore. You get smiley faces, and you get sad faces, and all of these things.
Happens.
Oh no, it's a very real thing.
I never got any of those.
Wait till you have your kids.
And then I think that there's a frustration that maybe perhaps someone who is in a position to hire millennials. God forbid one day we actually get to hire in the newspaper business, but when I have interviewed them and talked to them and had interactions with them, I don't begrudge the situation in which they're in. They're a product of their environment to a large degree. I do find it frustrating, though, when the first question they ask me is, what is my work-life balance? And I think that there has to be a degree by which you have to earn your place before you get entitled to all of your entitlements.
But there is research that shows, for example, after about the 42-hour mark, for every 7 hours of productivity you put in, you only get 1 in return. So maybe they're actually just recognizing the fact that working like a dog doesn't actually have more of a payoff.
So maybe they're smarter than the rest of us.
Maybe 20 years ago, if you'd said that in the workplace, you would have been considered a wuss. If you were starting out and you weren't prepared to work 50, 60 hours a week.
But if you've got research that shows you that you can get the same productivity from 40 as you can from 60, why work 60?
What do you think of this idea of snowflakes, of people, we saw the example in Berkeley with the students protesting because they didn't want to hear an offensive point of view. Come to you on this too, Adrian. I mean, are millennials too protected in terms of...
My favorite stories are the Gen Xers who tell me about how they shut down Preston Manning speaking at their campus in the 90s. I was 5 years old when that happened. And so before that, Joan Didion has written tons about a snowflake generation in the 60s and 70s. So like, listen, this is not a new concept. Every generation seems to think that the next generation after them is somehow softer. That's not a new concept, it's just applied to us. So like, it's our moment, it's fine, we'll take it. We're not particularly more snowflake-ish, I think, than other generations.
I just think that the whole notion of it's language too. It's sort of the vernacular that's come out of this generation. Trigger warnings, and I need a safe space, and you kind of chuckle at that.
Trigger warnings are a Gen X invention, invented in like the 70s and 80s.
But now it's very much just part of this
because they started
generation.
Teaching us, because those instructors became professors in our schools.
Well, and maybe
like a trigger warning
maybe you're hitting on part of the problem. Maybe it's part of the issue of who is teaching them and what they're being taught in that regard.
Sure. So I think that's a legitimate. And everybody
I think that's a legitimate question to explore: is how they're being taught, what they're being taught.
What about this idea that they're all addicted to social media? I mean, everybody is to a certain extent, but do you find it among your young students?
It really depends. My boyfriend logs into Instagram maybe like once every 2 weeks. He never posts on Facebook, whereas I know other people who are continually posting and tweeting and whatnot. It really depends on the person. And there has been a discussion of social media causing depression, but the issue is you don't know, you have correlation, you don't have causation. It could be that people who are more depressed tend to go on social media more. So you can't really attribute that necessarily to social media. I do think it is impacting relationship building because people are curating their lives, and there's this idea of perfection that's out there.
Well, yeah, if you don't like this one, if it's not a great date, you just look for the next one.
Put the filter on your Instagram, you look amazing.
That's right.
And you see the other person looking amazing, and then you look in the mirror and you don't look like that. I can see that.
So is your
impact.
generation less loyal, or maybe that, in terms of jobs, maybe that's not a bad thing, but what about in terms of people?
What do you mean?
Well, you can just, I'm not crazy about this date's not going well, so I'll just bail and look for the next person.
That's not just millennials.
I know, that's right. I mean, like, this is like the invention of the on-demand economy. It's not just us. I don't think we're the only people who are experiencing this. So
no, I can tell you definitely 40-year-old men that I went on dates with did things like this.
Yeah,
so.
I can imagine that. Yeah. No,
they just have it's a new version of swiping left. And I guess in our day and age, we just walk out on a date or just not call them back on our on our handheld devices. But I think that technology, for all of us, I mean, I'm 43. I am constantly on my phone. I'm addicted to the darn thing. Part of it's for work, but yeah, you want to see what's going on and checking the news and things like that. I don't just throw it on them. As far as millennials go, I think that's all of us. I think, but it seems to me we talked about research before. The research is showing that they are the ones that are having higher rates of depression, and it's because we're watching all these other people on Facebook and they have these so-called perfect lives, and we all know no one has a perfect life. It's ridiculous, and filtering these sorts of things.
It could be that, for example, we have less stigma about mental health, and there are more people are willing to come forward and talk about it.
Well, so many things to touch on. Every generation, it seems we have a new argument about the last generation.
Yes.
Thanks, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.